Hello there, my name is Gary Lawrence. I teach English at Cochise College. Today we're going to talk about analyzing literature as a primary source, which is basically the type of critical thinking and critical writing that you'll write about in English 102. What is a primary source? Well, the primary source is the original, complete, and unabridged text. It's the way the original experimenter, writer, artist intended it. Primary sources allow you to make discoveries firsthand. We experience the original as it was intended by the creator, and we experience the original on many levels: intellectual, emotional, physical, spiritual, others, versus a secondary source. A secondary source is a step away from a primary source. It's what other people have learned and written about this particular topic. Our examples in this English 102 course are going to be short stories. They're going to be literary fiction. There are 3 stories per module. There's various authors and styles of writing and meanings to the stories that you'll be exposed to. Our emphasis will be on writing aspects, literary significance, or the meaning and interpretation. Your paper topics, you'll choose your paper topics, and you'll write about such things. What was unique about the writing? Did it work? Were there a lot of periods or no? And why, for instance? We're going to look at and analyze the words on the page, just as they were intended by the artist. So start there and work from there to outside critical sources. Other examples of non-literary primary source documents, because I know many of you are not English majors. Something scientific or psychological: Sigmund Freud's notes. What did the original scientist or researcher put down? Lincoln's Gettysburg Address, the original text. Martin Luther King's letters from a Birmingham jail. Anne Frank's, or actually anybody's, diary. And first-hand accounts, newspaper articles, letters, other first-hand accounts, for instance, of Civil War, slavery, World War I, World War II, the time in history that things actually happened. How do you do this? Well, we're going to be working with stories. So one of the best tips or pieces of advice I could give you is to read your stories assigned each module, first and foremost. Set them aside, take a break, read them again. Read them at least twice to get the meaning and the gist of it. Our mantra is read like a writer, write for the reader. Reading like a writer, what does that mean? Record your reactions as you go, your questions, your interests. Pay attention to what you notice, what stands out to you, usually things that are repeated or a particular scene or line. Look for repetition, things that occur more than once, patterns that connect or emphasize objects or ideas. Look at the first and last paragraphs, the openings and closings. In literature, the openings and closings are power positions. Just like in an essay, your introduction and conclusion are power positions. Ask yourself also, is this believable? Does it make sense? Does it make sense to me? Why? Or why not? Complete all your reading quizzes as assigned. Those are the basic who, what, when, where. We're going to talk about how and why a little later as your analysis goes forward. Review potential topics. Like I said, those could be interpretations, they could be meanings, they could be comparisons of characters within a story, they could be comparisons of a theme within 2 stories, they could be comparisons of places, something like that. You're going to make an argument. Your papers will be argumentative papers. You're going to determine your topic, your position on that. Do you support it or don't you support it? Your purpose. What's my purpose? I'm going to convince everybody that Moby Dick was a symbol of evil in Melville's novel, for instance. You're going to write an analysis paper, an argument, as assigned. You're going to use one key aspect of this, using the story itself as your primary source. So your research is your story itself. Your quotes to support your position are going to be quotes from the story itself, lines, words, images from the story itself. So you're also going to, besides using quotes from the story, which is sometimes called parenthetical references, you're going to refute opposing points of view. You're going to say other people have interpreted the white whale in Moby Dick to mean this, but that's not correct because A, B, and C. You're going to use other stories in your papers sometimes as to support your position, and or you're going to use literary criticism written by other writers and literary critics to support your observations and position. What's your analysis going to look like? It's going to look like a regular essay or report. We're going to use the tell organizational function. Those of you that don't know tell, listen to a political speech. Next time you hear one, you're going to tell the reader or the listener what you're going to tell them. You're going to tell them. And then in the conclusion, in the ending, you're going to repeat it again. You're going to tell them what you told them. So tell. It's an overall overarching structure. And what you want is a total unified effect. That's Edgar Allan Poe's words. He thinks that all literature should follow, but all reports should have one real key position or statement or something to add to the research and interpretation of literature or art. First of all, of course, you're going to have an introduction with a thesis. That's your first tell. You're going to say what your argument is and what your three supporting points are. You're going to be followed by your supporting points. Each point will be addressed. These aren't necessarily paragraphs, but they are logical sections of your paper. As stated, you're going to include at least one opposing point of view and prove it wrong. You may include more than one to emphasize your argument. What you're doing by bringing opposing points together is limiting the options of what the interpretation is to yours. You're going to have a conclusion where you restate the thesis. That's your third tell. First tell is the intro. The second tell, all the detail is in the body. And the third tell is in the conclusion where you restate your position and emphasize it. And last, of course, because we're going to use sources through this, even if it's just the story itself, we're going to have a works cited page in good MLA format. And also, in our course, we'll have sample papers in Moodle, and you can take a look at those papers for how it's done, what my analysis will look like. Some tips and suggestions, some writing tips and suggestions. Know your subject, read the story more than once, many times if necessary. Take a break in between because you'll think about things in between and you'll see things differently. And take notes as you read because you may forget things. Note your impressions, your ideas, what you're feeling, those types of things. Identify the key elements. In literature, in the short stories we're going to be looking at, that's point of view, who tells the story, the plot, what happens, characters, who's who, the setting, and the theme, what's the conflict. You're going to answer questions like who, what, when, where, and don't worry too much about how and why. That will come out as you generate who, what, when, and where. Compare the story, the characters to your own experience, to something you're familiar with. You'll own it. Pay attention not just to what you think, but also to how the story makes you feel. What emotions are you having? Did your heart beat a little quicker? Did you catch your breath? Were you surprised? With fiction especially, the style of the writing is often distinctive and designed to affect the readers in a particular way. You're writing to affect the readers, that total unified effect of Poe's. What was the author's writing style? Did he or she use big words or little words? Long sentences or short sentences? Lots of sentences or not too many? Those things are designed to make an impact on the reader, to bring the reader along. A big question is, how is this the same or different from how you write, because English 102 is, after all, a writing class. And a bigger question is why? What was it about those short sentences, those easy words that Hemingway uses that had that effect on you? The prepositional phrases, that boom, 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 boom. He talked about a bombardment and he used all prepositional phrases. Did it support the theme or not? It usually do. Something else to think about as you're reading primary sources, literature. If this was an essay or a newspaper article, as opposed to fiction, what would the author say? Probably going to be fewer words and fewer emotional types of words. So why did this author go to all this trouble and tell a story instead of writing a newspaper article? What's the difference? Why did they do it? Why did they want people to read this particular story? One thing that I notice with writers is you try to, beginning writers especially, they try to write a paper in the appearance and in the order of the final product. So they basically start at the beginning, at the top, with the title and the introduction, and go to the supporting points. Remember those, and the opposing point, and the conclusion. And sometimes, you know what, it just doesn't work that way. Try starting where you can, your key point or wherever you can start. It's often easiest to start the middle first, then write the conclusion, then write the introduction. Move stuff around. Why? The introduction is the most important part because it's the first impression on your reader. The intro is also easier to write once you know what you already wrote in the body. There's no art form to that. It's just a fact. If you're still stumped after you've written the body, try writing the conclusion. And then copy the conclusion for your intro. That'll fill up the space and give you some ideas to work with. Why does that work? Because the introduction and conclusion work as wrappers that make your report, your paper complete. Part of the beginning, middle, and end pattern, part of your body has all the pertinent information. You're just going to wrap it up with your introduction and your conclusion like a ribbon and a bow on a present, on a gift, and you're going to give it to people. Okay, so that's our overview of analyzing literature as primary source. If you have any questions, please let me know. Thank you.